Hello, everyone. Good morning for those that are on the West Coast of the U.S. I want to thank everyone who is attending, and I hope everybody is safe, healthy, and sane. Today, we have a very exciting group of panelists that are going to be talking about their business and some of the things that they're currently doing during these unprecedented times. Obviously, it is very difficult and complicated for companies to just survive. And our panelists today, representing Etsy, Lumiata, and Fitz Frames, have not only thrived, but in thriving have also contributed and done well and done good for society and the community. So if we go on to the next slide. So very quickly, Wizeline, we're holding a handful of these webinars with some of our strategic partners who are handling and tackling the current situation in different ways. But very quickly, Wizeline is a technology provider that develops and delivers digital solutions for companies. We have offices around the world, in the US, in Mexico, Vietnam, Thailand, Australia, and Spain, and work with large and small companies to help them with their digital efforts, everything from data-oriented projects to the actual development and support of their applications. Go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to let our distinguished panelists introduce themselves. We're going to start with Addie.
Sure. Thank you so much for that intro. Distinguished it's a stretch, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Aditora Adikbola, also known as Addie. I am the Diversity and Inclusion Lead at Etsy, and I'm so very excited to be here with you all today to talk a little bit about what Etsy has done during these unprecedented times. Just a little bit about me. I started at Etsy about a year ago, almost to date. I'll be at my year anniversary on the 28th of this month. Prior to coming to Etsy, I was in higher education administration for about 9 years, focusing on access for students of color, diversity and inclusion programming, and success for folks who are either first generation or marginalized in some way. Again, I'm super excited to be here and look forward to chatting with you all.
Fantastic, Addie, welcome. Katie.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Katie Brando. I'm CPO at Fitz Frames, which means I run product and everything that there is that we have, app and frames. My background, actually, I spent the first decade of my career at Disney in R&D, primarily for consumer products as well as the parks, making the magic for Disneyland. Yeah, and I'm super happy to be part of this panel. I'm really excited to share a little bit about what we've done to try and help medical care workers out there fighting COVID.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. And Miguel.
Absolutely. Thank you. So first of all, thank you for inviting me today. Pleased to be here. I'm Miguel Alvarado. I am a CTO for a company named Lumiata. We have been building a machine learning / AI platform for healthcare. So we're helping healthcare with various use cases where we think AI can help quite a bit. I oversee software engineering and data science at Lumiata. A little bit about me. I am originally from Mexico. I was born and raised in Mexico City. I moved to the US in 1996. I wanted to work in software, and it felt like Seattle at the time was a good place to go to. So I've been working on software since then, mainly in the entertainment / media side of things. But recently I made a jump to healthcare because I felt like while everything I did was really cool and fun, it wasn't really moving the needle in terms of making the world a better place. So I felt that, I had to go into one of the two main pillars of society, either education or healthcare. And here I am in healthcare.
Fantastic, and welcome. So Addie, I'd love to start with you. Etsy has been around for about 15 years almost, and it's always been very community oriented and given a market to artisans from around the world. And more recently, especially with the need for masks, I feel like Etsy mobilized very quickly to get the products that people needed in their hands and not have to go through the traditional channels of the big box stores or the bigger e-commerce players. I'd love it if you could speak to, how Etsy came up with their strategy and how they deployed it, and if anything, what's coming down the line.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'd like to just start by contextualizing a little bit about Etsy and what's happened over the last several weeks. So to be clear, Etsy has really shown up for our communities, our buyers, our sellers, but more importantly, they've shown up for our employee base throughout the crisis. Our senior leadership has communicated early and often, much more than anything that I've experienced at any other workplace. And they transitioned us to a 100% remote workforce before it was clear that that was the right thing to do. And they've generally just kind of served as a beacon of light amidst so much uncertainty. And I think when it became clear that this crisis would have a crushing impact on micro businesses, we galvanized our seller base because we knew that they were talented enough to respond and respond quickly. And so we know that because we have a community of makers, artisans, merchants, it was just a prudent business strategy to kind of pivot and have them start making masks. And as a result, Etsy has become, I'd say, one of the few destinations in the world for protective gear that is fun and funky, and you're supporting a small business, somebody running their business out of their home who are also trying to support and feed their family. So specifically around cloth masks, because we don't make any claims to have any sort of medical grade protective gear, cloth masks have shown up on our site like nothing before. And as I said before, I think it was just sort of a prudent business strategy to take a group of people who are certified makers and who enjoy working with their hands and asking them to approach this problem in the way that felt right for us and for them.
Oh, that's great. Natty, I'd love to just double click on that. You have a global community. Probably many of your merchants are probably US based. And you spoke about how Etsy got ahead of this and started communicating and working from home. What kind of methods or what strategies did Etsy follow to communicate both internally as well as externally to keep everybody aware of where the market opportunities were, and then what Etsy was doing in order to enable and protect those merchants?
Yeah, so we already have a regular cadence of all company meetings that happen every month. And I should say, for people who aren't fully aware of Etsy and the workforce at Etsy, we're a company of only about 1,200 people across the globe. We have about 7 regional offices across the world. And so our company, as compared to lots of other tech giants, is incredibly small. And so when thinking about communicating to a workforce of 30,000 versus 1,200, an email goes a long way, Slack goes a long way. Our entire company is on Slack, and we communicate in a central channel pretty frequently. But as I mentioned before, our company has a regular cadence of what we call a y'all hands check-in. And that's everybody at the company on deck to hear about the innovations that we're coming up with, what's prudent, what's happening around the world. And as you all have probably experienced, COVID-19 has just taken over all of our company meetings over the last several weeks. So our executive team called an all company meeting immediately after we knew what was unfolding. And then our CEO, Josh Silverman, upped his communication by creating a session that he calls What's on My Mind. So it's an informal way to check in with him, what's keeping him up at night, what he's thinking around our business strategies, and how we might be able to show up even more for our communities and in the world. And it is so informal that we're able to sort of ask questions as they come. And there's no question that really is off the table. And as I mentioned before, I work in what feels like a sort of utopia, or what's close to it, because in my experience, asking the CEO whether or not we'll have jobs is not something that I'm familiar with or have had in my own experience. So direct communication, direct questioning, and direct answers is what I've experienced over the last few weeks.
I love that. At Wizeline, we have this thing called our weekly digest, and with our COO, we alternate week on week on what's happening in the company. But I love, so this format of what's on my mind, is that a video conference format, or?
Yep.
And
so
how often is it again?
So it's a video conference format. We at Etsy, we use Google Meets. And so Josh has scheduled those to be bi-weekly up until this point. And initially, we were getting updates through our company newsletter, which also comes out once a week. And that publication gave us a lot of sort of bite-sized pieces of information that we could digest quickly. But for more complicated information around our financials and where the company is heading for the next 6 months to a year, that typically is discussed in an all-company meeting or in these What's on My Mind, informal What's on My Mind sessions.
That's great. That's really great. Fantastic. Thank you. Katie, you know, I absolutely love your company. I think after Wizeline, it's probably one of the ones that I share the most on social network and social media. Can you explain a little bit about the company? And then I'd love to hear what you have done for the community and the first responders and during COVID crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being a great supporter of Fitz. We really appreciate it. I'm sure all the reaching out on your social network has been really helping us. So Fitz is we're a startup. We officially launched our app last August, actually, so less than a year. And we make custom fitted frames, so eyewear frames, glasses, basically. And so we have an app where that actually Wizeline helped us develop, where we can measure your face and you can virtually try on our various frame styles and our colors, choose the one you want, and then you can order it all through the app. Usually takes less than 5 minutes. And then we actually in-house, we actually also do our own manufacturing. So we 3D print every frame for the person. Every frame is actually designed from the ground up for your measurements that we get. And then we 3D print them in Ohio is where our manufacturing is. So that's what we've been doing since August. And then about a month and a half ago, when it was all over the news that there was a huge shortage of protective masks and other equipment in hospitals and other medical facilities, I think we felt very similar to, I think, how a lot of people felt, which is like, oh my gosh, like, that's awful. Like, what can we do? Like, how can we help? And so we kind of put our heads together and we reached out to some doctors that we knew. And we heard that not only, did hospitals need the N95 masks that they were short on, but also that there was this huge need for protective eyewear all of a sudden. And specifically eyewear that covers basically your eyebrows and your eyes, and then from like all sides, from droplet possible sources of infection that might be in the air or might get kind of thrown at you if you're a medical worker. So we heard that. When we heard that, we were like, oh my gosh, well, we can, we make eyewear already. We can definitely make something that's more protective than normal glasses. So we set out to do that in about 11 days, actually, from when we were like, let's try this. We actually had a product on our app 11 days later that we had done half a dozen iterations on, tests with. We had doctors help us test early prototypes and give us feedback. So we made sure that what we were offering was exactly what they needed or as close as we could get. And so this is what they look like. We definitely went for function over style, but as you can see, they have like a lot of coverage. They cover my eyebrows. They go all the way down. So if I was wearing a mask, it would cover the majority of my face. On the side, there's like super coverage. So basically coverage from all directions. And because they're custom fit, we can make sure that the fit is actually really good for every doctor, nurse, and technician that orders them. We can make sure that it's a really good fit. And so I'm just super proud of what we did, given that it took us 11 days. I mean, we developed the system, and a large part of it was how Wizeline helped us develop this pipeline. But we always said that we're a startup. We want to be agile. We want to be able to bring new products to market really quickly. I don't think anyone, including us, ever thought that we'd be able to do it in 11 days. And so I'm super proud of the company, and I'm also really happy that we've been able to pivot and produce something that is helping the situation out there right now.
Well, I actually find them incredibly fashionable, and I think that all you need to do is what North Face did back in the 80s and 90s and get the hip hop community to be wearing them, and then it's just going to be everywhere. So Jay-Z, if you're listening. So a question on the prioritization. So as a startup, actually this is the problem that many companies have. How do you prioritize the product development that's good for society and may have some benefit to your business versus focusing on the core business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're a really small company right now. So really, when we were deciding if we should go for it or what we should do, it really was just a conversation with, me, the founder, and the CEO. And, we kind of just looked at each other through Zoom and we're like, we all want to do this. This is really important. We definitely need to do this. So then now that we're making them, now it's a little bit of balance, between, we want to support our normal customers because there's a more need for glasses that you can order from home than ever before. And so we want to really make sure that we support that community and still make the traditional eyewear while prioritizing the medical eyewear. So it's been a balancing act, definitely for the first, until now. And also now, we are still prioritizing very much the medical eyewear. So the vast majority of our production is trying to put out as many as we can. We actually have a wait list of 3,000 medical workers that want the eyewear, and we're giving them away to as many medical care providers as possible, because we don't want them to have to pay for to be safe in there while they're helping all of us be healthier. We don't want them to have to pay to be safe. So we have a GoFundMe that we started where we're collecting donations that basically allow us to give most of the eyewear that we're making away. But yeah, it's a balancing act. So we're still, we reserve about 25% of our production for the traditional eyewear. That's been pretty steady since we started doing this. But we've also been working to expand our production significantly. So so we're able to make more and more now, much more now than we were a month and a half ago when we started. But yeah, it's definitely tricky, trying to support both communities.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm just gonna ask Caroline if she can actually put the GoFundMe link in our chat for anybody who's listening or who's out there and would love to donate, because it's obviously a great cause, and if we have 3,000 in backlog, let's try to get as many of these in their hands as possible. Thank you. Miguel, so AI is obviously quite a buzzword, but behind that, machine learning and just becoming intelligent and automating a lot of these processes is something that everybody needs to adopt. And the same way that every business needs to put at least some of their technology and their processing in the cloud, eventually industries are going to have to adopt machine learning. I'd love for you to speak a little bit about what COVID has done to your industry and your business. But before that, I'd love for you to tell people what your approach to helping the COVID situation and what you did and how many people participated.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done a few different things, but one thing we're very proud of, because it was a little bit more philanthropic, was a global hackathon that we organized. So we were hearing from our customers firsthand about some of the problems that they were facing. So this is healthcare providers and payers, so insurance companies. And there's a wide diversity of problems that they're trying to solve because of COVID. We believe fundamentally that AI, machine learning, and automation can help quite a bit. And we thought, it would be very interesting, it would be very powerful, and we almost felt the responsibility to do this, to bring the global AI community together and see what we can build to solve some of these problems, and even problems that people are not even really thinking about in the healthcare space. So we put together very quickly, like in about a week, we put together a hackathon, and we posted a few open-ended questions framing the problems that people could go after. But bottom line, we were going after AI solutions that participants could actually submit. And long story short, people went at it for 2 weeks, and then we had a first place winner and a second place winner. And we had people from 239 cities participate, 750 participants, and this is over close to 70 different countries. So in the participants, we had a few teams that had teenagers, and our youngest participant was 10 years old. So those last three things to me were the most special out of it. But number one, how broad of a reach we had, how quickly we got people together from all these different countries and cities. And then the second, how we were able to tap into this teenage community that have been studying a little bit of machine learning and programming and whatnot. But then we captured even a 10-year-old. That to me is very, very special. That this person submitted their project saying, well, I'm not very confident about it. I'm competing against 40-year-olds, but it's probably not going to be good, but here it is. But, we encouraged him to just keep going at it, right? I mean, the submission was okay. Was definitely not the winner, but it was very special to see that happen. And the winner we had some really amazing submissions. Like some people got very creative. This one gentleman created a machine learning model that using a very low cost microphone, if you put the microphone close to your lungs and over the internet, it could capture the sound of it. It can actually detect with some level of accuracy, a decent level of accuracy, if you have COVID or not. So it analyzes the sound of your lungs. And there's a lot of publications that have gone around showing how you can use X-rays to predict whether you have COVID or not. But this is going a little bit more left field and going with audio signal, which we thought was really cool. But the first prize winner was a team of people in UK that are testing for immunity. We thought this was cool because everybody is thinking about trying to predict whether people have COVID or not, and how wide the spread is and whatnot. But very few people are doing stuff around immunity. So they created this end-to-end system using blockchain technology to keep the data secure and private. And this is mainly intended to be rolled out to healthcare workers, which are at the highest risk. And a lot of these people are getting sick. So taking advantage that they're high-risk population and that we have people in that community that are getting sick and now recovered and going back to work, do two things: give them a quick way to test for immunity so that they know whether they've built immunity or not. But in addition, capture all this data and present it to the research community to really understand how immunity is developing or not, because there's a lot of controversy on whether if you get COVID, you immediately build immunity or not. So this could give a service to healthcare workers and also give data that the research community doesn't have enough of. And the process is very simple. The idea is that you would still get a blood test. You would get the results. You would then capture the blood test with your phone, and then there would be a machine learning model on the other end that analyzes the test, and it'll tell you with 97% accuracy, whether you have immunity or not. The other thing is that if it'll also, even before that, it will tell you when is a good time to take the blood test. So it'll ask you a bunch of questions. So then there is another machine learning model that is analyzing those questions, the answers to those questions, and then tells the healthcare workers when is a good time to take the test again, or the first time if they haven't taken it already. So one of the things that we committed to doing for the winner is not only give them a cash prize, so that was a $10,000 cash prize, that we actually got from from a sponsor. We got the Blues Association, the Blue Shield Association, to actually pitch in with the money. So we're giving them the cash, but we also committed to finding how to deploy the solution within the healthcare community that we have from our customers and partners. So this is a UK company. We're going to try to figure out how we could help them deploy that here in the US.
That's very, very cool. And then the question on how COVID is impacting your business. So, in more traditional businesses, what we found at Wizeline is that they've had the idea of going to the cloud. They've had idea of better using data to make decisions, but they always push it out. It's like, well, we'll do that next year. With COVID, it's accelerating a lot of these digitization projects.
Yep.
The healthcare industry is also one of these that has been very slow moving to adopt new software, cloud-based technologies. What changes have you seen?
That's a great question. Everything's been accelerated. So one of the things that I've always had an observation on about machine learning in healthcare is that everything is the data is really old. People use very old data sets, and there's always like a 30-day lag on the data. Nothing is real time. But COVID has changed that. People realize, no, we have to have real time capabilities to predict things because the data changes every day. People don't even know these days if they're using the right data when it comes to COVID specific matters. So they have to have way quicker ways to analyze the data and respond to the data. That's one thing. Now there's a huge umbrella that's gaining huge traction now because of COVID, and that is telemedicine. Telemedicine was already on a path, and it's probably 10 years old, but the adoption rates have been very, very slow. And I think healthcare in general has been a little bit scared, or just maybe scared is not the right word. There's been a level of skepticism, I think, around telemedicine and if it's really going to move the needle. Now, with COVID, people have been forced to use telemedicine. It's like the only way, and it's been incredibly successful. And along with telemedicine, then comes AI. So now we have formed a big initiative around telemedicine because AI, machine learning, I use the term AI because it's common ground, but really the right term is machine learning. Is a non-hyped term. So machine learning has a big place in it because it allows you to personalize the experience and allows you to scale the capabilities. So there's this notion in machine learning of using the human in the loop. Well, you can have a provider in the loop, and you can have, for the most part, algorithms deal with the front end issues with the provider feedback, eventually get smarter and smarter. But you can have a very quick turnaround in taking care of a patient on the front end. Eventually, they may have to still talk to a provider, but you can automate a lot of the more mundane things that people have to deal with when it comes to healthcare. So it's very exciting to see what's happening with telemedicine. Again, it's nothing new, but it's just COVID has accelerated the adoption and has force function in a lot of companies.
That's great. So a general question, and I'd love to get the perspective of whoever wants to chime in. But Etsy has been a very responsible brand since its inception, a brand that cares about its community. And I've had the privilege of meeting the management team at both Fitz Frames as well as Lumiata. The CEO at Lumiata sits on several boards for the governor of California and is very, very involved in social programs. At the leadership level, do you think if their value system were different, would the company be acting in a different way? Because it feels like this is in the DNA.
I'm happy to chime in there. Absolutely. I think a company's culture is predicated almost entirely on its leadership teams. And I think that that had a lot to do with why I made my way through Etsy's doors in the first place. Is working in diversity and inclusion or any sort of social justice programming requires a lot of convincing for constituents across the board. And the hardest part of those types of jobs, D&I jobs in totality, I think is being brought into a company or workplace that has a culture that is completely not ready for change. D&I requires that you challenge the status quo, that you are open to innovating new ways of approaching really old problems. And I think that if you're brought into a company where the leadership sees it as a sort of external function or somewhere on the periphery, you feel that. You feel that in the work that you do, you feel that when you go to work, you feel that from other employees. So to answer your question, I think you are absolutely right. This work is embedded in Etsy's DNA. The fabric of Etsy is woven with tools of, social justice ideologies, diversity and inclusion principles, and from the very top to the person at the very middle to the very bottom, no matter how you see it or where you view it from, when you walk through Etsy's doors that this is a company whose mission is real and that we actually care about what we say and that we actually want to back up what we say with real action. So I think that what I've seen over the past several weeks and what the world is now seeing from Etsy is stuff that was already there. We had already cultivated an environment that would allow for this type of situation to feel a little less scary for the people who work for this company.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, I think that if Delauer had been a different kind of person, it might have been, maybe we wouldn't have done the hackathon. And on the contrary, what happened is when I came to Delauer and said, hey, we should do a hackathon for COVID, he said, well, why don't we do it globally? Why should we limit it to just the company? Let's do a global thing. I said, now you're talking. So some people would not have had that same reaction. Some people could have been like, well, why are we getting distracted with this hackathon thing? We have so much work to do as a startup. Is that really important, et cetera? So it has to come from the top, and it is engraved in the value system of the leadership for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think companies are the people that work there, right? Like that is what a company is, and especially the leadership team, like the examples they set, and obviously the priorities that they set. Obviously, it was a little easier for us at Fitz because we're so small, so we didn't have a lot of people we had to convince. But yeah, I mean, for sure, like all of us, like as soon as there was like anything that we remotely could do to help, like no one had any hesitation. And that definitely let us move quickly and get something out there.
Fantastic. So I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of time for any questions that come from the audience. I just want to do and it's difficult to say post-COVID world because I think we are going to be living with COVID for a little while, but once we come out of this, what changes and what stays the same? And I'll go from left to right based on my screen. So Katie, Miguel, and then Addie.
Yeah, for Fitz, I mean, we actually, we're pretty sure that there's going to be a market for the protective eyewear that we've developed even going forward, which was never an area that we would have gotten into, or at least not anytime soon. So there's this whole community now that we feel like we can support with products that wouldn't have happened. So that's definitely a difference, and we definitely plan on continuing to make that those frames. And then also, with the fact that everyone has been at home for the last few months, and people still need glasses. Our core business also has really been growing quickly, and so I think that has made us grow quickly as well, with our manufacturing capacity, as I mentioned, but also with some other things that we have internally. We went from a growing startup to like all of a sudden like there's this boom and we got to handle it. So we've grown for sure in the last few months for the better. We've learned some lessons, and yeah, I think we're definitely it was kind of this forcing function, right? Like everything hit the fan, and we had to react, and yeah, we're definitely different for it.
Great, thank you, Katie. Miguel.
Yes, so it's interesting. One of the things that I think is really cool that has happened recently is that work and personal life, the boundaries between them have been blurred quite a bit in a good way. And I think, you know, you see now people doing calls at work and you see their kids kind of showing up in the background and their dogs and, you know, things of that nature. I think that in the professional world, we're always too worried for things like that happening, right? And I think we've become a lot more relaxed, and that's a good thing. You know, we can find ways to have more connectiveness between our personal life and our work life and achieve better balance that way. So that's one thing. For us at Lumiata, you know, I mentioned telemedicine is going to be a big thing. So it's going to change, it's going to add some focus to what we're already doing. I think that the hackathon created an interesting impact in me personally as a CTO, and it's made me think about how can we collaborate more with the global communities on specific projects, right? And how do we do that in a systematic way, with some method, of course, that can scale over time. So I'm gonna personally be spending some time thinking about that. And it doesn't mean that you outsource projects to teams on the other side of the world. It's more like, how do you bring specific kinds of communities together to solve specialized specific problems? So that's going to be a huge change for us, I think.
That's awesome. Patty?
Yeah, I think the events of the past few months have really affirmed Etsy's business model. I think that as we're seeing some unfortunate turn of events around layoffs and people losing work, we are really, really fortunate to have a marketplace that welcomes folks who are creative or have suppressed some creativity for more functional roles. And I think that this will be a space where people will come, and we welcome that. We want more makers, we want more merchants, and we want more sellers. So for Etsy, I think we're pretty well positioned to kind of ride this wave out. None of us know what will happen in the next several months. I think we've all learned that, you know, time is a thing, it's a construct. There is no certainty in our future, but our business model really does position us well to be able to welcome more people onto our platform. But I think on the flip side, like most companies, we're in the midst of conversations about what it might mean for workforces to go fully remote. I am incredibly privileged to work for a company that has a beautiful headquarters. Our space is in Dumbo, Brooklyn. It is a magical place to work. And so thinking about not being able to participate in such an incredible physical experience is tough. And I think, again, we're in the midst of figuring out what a remote workforce would look like. We're incredibly tight knit. We're a very social workforce. We look forward to celebrating together and working together in our HQ. But we know that these conversations have started, and we're not trying to slow them down, but we are trying to figure out what the balance looks like for a company like us that are so sort of attached to our physical space and really did enjoy going to work. So yeah, I think those two things are the competing, but okay priorities for now. Nothing that feels too heavy or difficult to overcome.
Now that you bring up a really good point around from where will work happen, and like you, we're not yet algorithms solving problems for companies, right? We're still people, and that personal connection I think is incredibly important. But then you have to wonder, you know, what is your company? Your company is not the building that you're in; it's the culture that you've built. So it will be interesting how the work culture evolves. You know, at Wizeline, we had decided last year that by 2022, over 50% of our staff would be working remotely because we wanted to tap into the global talent. You know, our view is that talent is distributed evenly around the world. Experience and opportunities aren't, and so we wanted to be the vehicle that would be able to bring that through educational programs and then through jobs. And so this has accelerated things, and you know, we may be able to get to that 50% even before that. But it's interesting times. You know, our goals, and I know that your goals is just making sure that our people stay safe, and then equipping them to make sure that they're able to be productive from wherever they are. So we have a question in our chat here. Any thoughts on blockchain with all of the problems in the global supply chain, and how can it be implemented? Any thoughts? I can kick it off while you guys are thinking about. I think in terms of the overall supply chain, I think blockchain brings really interesting applications around the authenticity of products and making sure that they remain unadulterated as they go through the entire supply chain and they get to the final product, either as an independent products themselves or as a component of a bigger product. And then in the future, it'll be easier to track when one of them becomes damaged, and you can apply machine learning to see if and when you can actually, you need to maintain an individual product or part within a bigger product.
Right. I had to take a moment because I hadn't thought about blockchain from this perspective. So I had to think about it a little bit, but I think riffing off what Bismarck was saying, I think that, any place where you need to have integrity across a process, right? Where the thing that blockchain has is that data is immutable, right? And you can't tamper with it. So if you need an environment where, you're going through a supply chain and you need to have record of every step that happens, and every step needs to be immutable, and in a very secure in a way where privacy is respected. I think that's where blockchain taps in. It's a general question, so I'm giving a general answer back. I think there's a lot of specificity that would be revealed depending on the specific use case that we're talking about.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to ask our panelists if they have any questions of each other.
I do. I'm curious about, so you guys were able to produce these glasses in like 11 days, right? So that's pretty admirable. I'm impressed by that. But what were the roughest things? What were actually, another question. Was there ever a point where you were like, oh man, it's not gonna happen. What did we get ourselves into? And what triggered those thoughts? What were the difficult parts of it?
Honestly, I don't think we had time to have thoughts like that. I mean, certainly when we first started, we decided to try it, we knew if it was going to work, it had to get out quickly, and I mean, there was definitely like, oh my God, like, we can't get a new product out in 2 weeks, or, it's going to take months. Like, that's normal, right? Like, so yeah, but really the speed at what we were going, like you had to just throw any doubt and caution to the winds, like it was gone. But yeah, I mean, I would say maybe the most logistically difficult part of it is that we found some friends that we knew that were doctors on the front lines, and they agreed to help us test. And so we had to get them prototypes every day. We were sending them a new prototype, and obviously it takes a day for shipping to get there. And so we were actually making changes to the product before we got feedback on the last model. And so it was kind of this weird rolling product development cycle that we had. But it was, not as straightforward as normal product development is, but in the end, I mean, I'm a little amazed that we were able to get something out that works so well, but it happened.
That's pretty interesting. It reminds me a little bit of what we experienced with the hackathon. So I mean, it ended up being a much more ambitious project than we originally thought. But like you, when we were in the midst of it, we were just, in crunch time. We weren't even thinking about, oh, is this going to work out? We're just like, so there's something to be said about having a healthy disregard to the impossible, right? When you're trying to move fast and get things done, even if you've never done it before. That's cool.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have to kind of communicate that to the participants of the hackathon? Like, communicate that this is a different sort of situation, maybe a different timeline and a different sort of, result that you were looking for from them?
Not really. I mean, we had, the all the explanations were online and in our online collateral, but we didn't have to explain much more than that. And there was just an underlying sense of urgency, I think, because of the topic, which was around COVID-19. What we did also see is that a lot of people were piggybacking with using other projects that they had already been working on. So I think some people were able to put together things very quickly because they leveraged a bunch of other things that they were already working on. They just had to adapt it to a new problem domain.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's great.
Yeah.
I have a question, but I see that there's one in the Q&A, so I'm happy to.
No, Eddie, please, and then we'll answer that question.
Okay, so I'm curious to hear from you, Katie and Miguel. What was keeping you up at night as the COVID situation was unfolding back in like late February, early March? And what keeps you up at night now? Are they the same things, different things? Just curious to hear from you too. Related to the business or otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, I can go first. I mean, I think I mentioned it earlier, but when, this crisis happened, right? And thankfully, I was able to, it wasn't a problem for me to stay home and for my husband to stay home. And so we were safe, but, reading everything that was happening, it was just like, you want to help, you feel so helpless, not only, maybe not being a doctor, but also like being stuck at home. Like I can't even leave my house. Like, how am I going to help? So that definitely was like really, I mean, I think a lot of people felt it. And then I'm really happy that we were able to find a way that, I could contribute, it makes me sleep better at night. But now, what keeps me awake is trying to figure out how we can get more of our eyewear out there, because our production is limited and we're working to grow, but it's just not enough. So yeah, that's a large part of what I do now, is trying to figure out how we can not only make the product better, but also just get way more out there quicker to people who need it.
Yeah, for me, so at the beginning, obviously the well-being of my family was top of mind, but I tend to have the approach of thinking about the worst case scenario and plan around it and then move on. So I huddled with my wife and we thought about, well, what if we all get sick? What happens? And we kind of had a few different plans of what would happen. And then I felt fine. I felt like, okay, we have a plan. But then what really worried me and continues to worry me is misinformation. Misinformation and how do you even know what misinformation is?
Yeah.
Even sources that could be trustworthy, maybe they don't have ill intentions, but they could be wrong, right? So how do you know what to listen to and what to trust when it comes to it? So that's I think a problem that goes well beyond COVID, but that worries me still. And the other one is observing like the level of bureaucracy that certain governments have to go through to mobilize. That is, to me, really worrisome as well. And I'm not going to go into specifics of that because it gets political, but it's a huge concern of mine.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
plus one.
I think actually, I was just saying that's a good point. The actual mobilization in itself has been tricky, right? Especially even like with all this PPE, right? At first it was all about N95 masks. And for a second we were like, oh my gosh, can we print masks? Like, we don't know anything about masks. Like, can we come up with a design? And that was just like, we were not going to be good at that, and so it was definitely finding a way that we could contribute well and not just throw something out there that, would create more confusion.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. We have another question by Claudio Rivas, who has a question about what to disrupt first, business models or business processes. And my general view on this is that, especially right now, you need to think about the short and midterm. So if you're a business and survival is in question, you need to be focused on things that are going to allow you to survive so you can thrive on the other side. So whatever is going to have the greatest impact in the short term, that's what we should be thinking about. assuming that your business is going to survive, I think thinking about the midterm and the impact that you can have is the next highest priority. For the long term, there are certain things, some people say that there isn't anything new that's going to happen. It's just the acceleration of the former present. It's just happening faster. And e-commerce was obviously going to be a very thing, and it was going to impact brick and mortars. Now it's impacting it even more. There's a retailer that I work with that has over 2,000 points of service. They have over 2,000 stores. They had to close all of the stores, and now e-commerce has become a lot more important. And so the uptime has become important. Having the entire catalog of offerings has become more important. So it's just accelerating. So I would say that think about the short and midterm and figure out what has the potential of having the biggest impact. Here in our community, we have a daycare center that used to have about 35 kids that would come in, and suddenly they went from 35 to zero and zero revenue. And they launched a daily Spanish and sing-along class. And now they have close to 500 subscribers that are doing this. And so their business is actually doing better than before. So I think that there are a lot of opportunities. Crisis always creates new opportunities, and it's about moving very quickly, like Katie and Fitz, to tap into an opportunity to do well and do good. So I don't know if there are any closing remarks from our panelists.
I just wanted to say that this was incredibly valuable for me and fruitful, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to participate. I was inspired by Katie's show and tell, and I wanted to show everybody an Etsy mask that I ordered. I'm Nigerian, and there are tons of what we call Ankara prints on Etsy, and there is a seller out of Baltimore who is making these really beautiful masks that aren't medical grade, but they're cloth and they're reusable. You can wash them. So I urge folks, if they're interested, to check out the inventory on the site.
Awesome.
Miguel, Katie?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. It was great to hear what other people have been doing in these times, and quite inspiring too, how quickly people can mobilize. So thank you. And I guess just a word to the audience is, a lot of times in times of crisis is where we can find the best opportunities to do good and even find new products and businesses to go after. So.
Yeah, and I would just echo, thank you for putting the panel together. Honestly, the span that we have here, the different perspectives that we have on the crisis is really interesting to hear the different ways that people have kind of stepped up to the plate to make sure people, feel good and safe working from home, and obviously helping the healthcare world progress. I mean, it's really cool. So thank you. It was great to participate.
Fantastic. There was a question about the mask. In our follow-up email, we'll send links to the specific mask, and then to the sites of the panelists that represent. I want to thank everyone. I do believe that right now, those who can have a responsibility to help, and I'm very excited to be partnered with all three of your companies, because I do believe that in these times there is the ability to do well and do good. So thank you for everyone who participated. I look forward to following up.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.